The gravity generator on Outpost 4 Beta had a rhythmic stutter that every resident had memorized in their bones. Every 40 seconds, the artificial pull would dip by 5%, sending stomachs lurching upward and causing liquids to tremble in their cups. Jace waited for the dip before pouring the synth coffee. He watched the brown sludge rise dangerously near the rim of the mug, hover for a heartbeat, and then settle back down as the gravity stabilizer kicked in with a metallic groan. It was a small, predictable misery in a life defined by them. He took a sip and grimaced. It tasted like burnt copper and regret. Jace wiped a hand over his face, feeling the scratch of a 3-day beard. He was 40 years old, though the mirror usually argued he was 50. The clinic around him was a converted cargo bay, cluttered with scavenged medical scanners, boxes of off-brand sterile gauze, and a surgical table that had seen better days during the Unity Wars. It was a mess, but it was his mess. The blast doors hissed open. A Tellarite miner named Gorg stumbled in, clutching a hand wrapped in a grease-stained rag. "You did it again," Jace said, not making it a question. Gorg grunted, collapsing onto the examination stool. The gravity stutter hit, and the miner bobbed slightly in his seat. The hydro drill kicked back. "I swear, Doc, the machine hates me. Machines do not have feelings. Gorg, they just have terrible operators." Jace peeled back the rag. The flesh was torn, angry and red, coated in lubricant oil. He reached for a canister of antiseptic foam and a dermal knitter, while he worked, cleaning the wound with practiced, steady hands. Gorg filled the silence with the usual sector gossip. The man loved to talk, mostly to distract himself from the sting of the disinfectant. "They say a cruiser was spotted in Sector 9, Gorg said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A black ship. No transponder. Some of the boys think it is the Shadow Fleet. Vampires." Jace rolled his eyes, adjusting the setting on the dermal knitter. "There are no vampires in the fringe. Gorg, there are barely any humans left. Just pirates, smugglers, and idiots who do not know how to handle hydro drills." Gorg hissed as the laser sutures fired. "I am telling you, Doc, the old stories. They say the vampire queen drinks stars dry. They say she can walk through airlocks without a suit. And I say you need to keep this wound dry for 24 hours, Jace said, slapping a synth skin patch over the now sealed cut. "Or the only thing eating you will be gangrene." He sent the miner on his way with a stern look and a lollipop from a jar he kept for the few children on the station. As the doors closed, Jace leaned back against the counter, exhaling a long breath. Vampires. The galaxy was vast and terrifying enough with just warlords and corrupt union bureaucrats. It did not need monsters from children's stories to make it worse. The station proximity alarm screamed. It was not the rhythmic ping of a docking request. It was the harsh, dissonant shriek of a collision warning. Jace slammed his coffee mug down, splashing liquid onto a stack of data pads, and grabbed his trauma kit. He did not have to wait for the call. On an outpost this small, an emergency meant everyone with a pulse and a functional pair of hands was on duty. He ran through the corridors, his magnetic boots clanking on the grating. The gravity stutter hit him mid-stride, making him weightless for a second before he slammed back down, stumbling but keeping his momentum. He reached the hangar bay just as the airlock cycled. The rescue crew was already there. It was a sorry sight. 3 miners who smelled of distilled engine coolant and a pair of loading drones that were sparking from their joints. "What do we have?" Jace shouted over the roar of the atmospheric cyclers. "Something hit the belt," the hangar chief yelled back, pointing toward the mag field. "Stealth ship. Small. Fast. It clipped a rock and spun out. We are dragging it in now." The tractor beams groaned, straining against a mass that should not have been that heavy. Slowly, a vessel materialized through the containment field. It was sleek, shaped like an obsidian dagger, its hull composed of a material that seemed to absorb the hangar lights rather than reflect them. It crashed onto the deck with a deafening screech of tearing metal. "Get the jaws," Jace ordered, rushing forward. The drones pried at the cockpit canopy. The metal screamed, resisting, and then shattered. Smoke poured out, white and acrid, smelling of ozone and something sweeter, like rotting orchids. Jace vaulted onto the wing, peering into the smoke. There was only one pilot. She was slumped over the controls, held in place by a harness that looked more like a torture device than a safety restraint. Jace cut the straps with his laser scalpel. As the body came free, he gasped. She was wearing bio-armor, plates of shifting organic chitin that seemed to be trying to knit themselves back together over deep gashes. But it was the woman herself who stopped his breath. She was tall, impossibly pale, with hair like spilled ink floating in the residual static. And she was bleeding, but the blood was not red. It was a shimmering, viscous substance that refracted the hangar lights, splitting the white beams into spectrums of violet and gold. "She is not breathing," one of the miners shouted. "Move!" Jace barked. He hauled her out of the cockpit, his boots slipping in the strange, glowing blood. She was heavy, dense as a neutron star despite her slender frame. He threw her over his shoulder, ignoring the protests of his aging spine, and ran for the clinic. The clinic was cold. Jace had cranked the environmental controls down, hoping to slow whatever hemorrhaging was happening inside the stranger's body. He had stripped off the ruined armor, which had peeled away from her skin with a wet, sucking sound that made his stomach turn. Now she lay on the surgical table, pale as marble, her body a map of lacerations and burns. Jace worked in a trance. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he reached for the nano-stitches. "I am just a human man treating wounds," he murmured to himself, the sound of his own voice a fragile anchor in the quiet room. Just treating wounds. Nothing more. Unaware of whose mess I am touching. He repeated the mantra as he clamped an artery that pulsed with that impossible starlight blood. The physiology was all wrong. Her heart rate was too slow, 10 beats per minute. Her temperature was freezing. The scanner kept throwing up error messages, unable to classify her species. As he worked, stitching a long gash across her ribs, the room seemed to darken. It was not a power failure. The shadows in the corners of the clinic elongated, stretching toward the table like hungry fingers. The air grew frigid, breath misting in front of Jace's face. He blinked, trying to clear his vision. Just fatigue, he told himself. Just the stress. The woman on the table stirred, her head thrashed to the side, her lips, blue with blood loss. "Parted. Ve victis," she whispered. The voice was a rasp, layered with a harmonic resonance that vibrated in Jace's teeth. "Eterna nox. Solus imperium." Jace paused, his scalpel hovering. That was High Gothic. Nobody spoke High Gothic anymore, except in the most pretentiously ancient academic circles. Silas, the old miner Jace had treated earlier, had lingered by the door to help with the supplies. At the sound of the woman's voice, Silas dropped a tray of instruments. The metal clattered loudly on the floor. "Did you hear that?" Silas whispered, backing away, his face draining of color. "Those are war phrases, the scourge. It is just delirium." "Silas," Jace said sharply, though his own heart hammered against his ribs. "She is in shock." "No," Silas stammered. "My grandmother told stories. Solus imperium. That is what the Nightwalkers chanted when they burned the Proxima colony. That is a vampire, Jace. That is a demon. Get out," Jace said. "But Doc, I said get out." Go drink yourself into a stupor and forget you heard anything." Silas fled, the blast doors hissing shut behind him. Jace looked back down at the woman. Her eyes snapped open. They were not human eyes. There was no sclera, no iris, just a solid, burning crimson that seemed to generate its own light. For a second, Jace felt like prey. He felt a primal instinct to run, to hide, to curl into a ball and pray for a quick end. Then the woman groaned, the red fading to a dull, pained maroon, and the terrifying presence collapsed back into the shape of a wounded person. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice weak but imperious. "Outpost 4 Beta," Jace said, forcing his hands to resume their work. "You crashed. You were bleeding out." She tried to sit up, but Jace put a hand on her shoulder. It felt like touching a block of ice. "Stay down," he ordered. "You have lost a lot of blood, or whatever this fluid is." She looked at him, really looked at him, and Jace felt stripped bare by the intensity of her gaze. "I am Lyra," she said. The lie was smooth, practiced, but there was a flicker of hesitation behind it. "I am a mercenary. I was targeted by pirates in the nebula." Jace snorted softly, applying a final bandage to her arm. "Pirates. Right. Because pirates usually fly stealth ships that cost more than this entire sector and shoot down mercenaries wearing bioarmor from the Third Era." She stiffened. "You know armor types?" "I was a medic in the Union infantry for 12 years, Jace said. "I know a lot of things I wish I did not. Look, lady, I do not care who you are. I do not care if you stole that ship or if you are running from the law. In this room, you are a patient. That is it." She stared at him, stunned. She seemed braced for interrogation, for torture, or for worship. She clearly did not know what to do with clumsy honesty. "I need to leave," she said abruptly, swinging her legs off the table. "You will die if you stand up," Jace said flatly. "I cannot stay here. If they find me." She stopped, her eyes darting to the door. "Anyone who saw me, the crew who pulled me out, they are liabilities." Jace froze. He slowly put down the laser scalpel. "What did you say?" "They saw the ship," she said, her voice turning cold and pragmatic. "They saw me. If my pursuers track me here, they will torture everyone to find my trajectory. It is cleaner to silence them now." Jace stepped between her and the door. He crossed his arms over his chest. His uniform was stained with her glowing blood. "Nobody is silencing anyone," he said. "Those men saved your life. They are already dead," she snapped, a flash of something ancient and terrible entering her voice. "You do not understand what is hunting me." "I do not care," Jace said. He pointed a finger at her, a gesture so pitifully human against her aura of power that it was almost funny. "You touch one hair on their heads, and I will lock this clinic down. These blast doors are rated for orbital bombardment. You will be stuck in here with me until the oxygen runs out." She stared at him. "You would die to protect strangers?" "I would die to stop a murder in my clinic," Jace corrected. "It is bad for business." She looked at him, confused, frustrated, and for the first time uncertain. She had expected fear. She had expected greed. She had not expected a stubborn, tired man blocking her path with nothing but a bad attitude. Before she could respond, the station shuddered. It was not the gravity glitch. This was an impact. Jace grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. A siren began to wail, different from the collision alarm. This was the intrusion alert. "They are here," Lyra whispered. Jace checked the monitor on the wall. External cameras showed a ship docking, a sleek Predator-class frigate. It bore no name, but on its hull, painted in matte gray, were two symbols side by side, the golden eagle of the Galactic Union and a stylized, jagged drop of blood. Union, Jace frowned. And, what is that? The Vampire Court, she said, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. They are working together. The clinic comms unit crackled to life. It was the station administrator, his voice trembling. Jace? Jace, we have guests. They are asking for a crash survivor. They are heavily armed. Jace. They just shot Silas. The blood drained from Jace's face. Silas? He tried to run. They just cut him down. Nyx Arethiel, the woman calling herself Lyra, flinched. It was a small, involuntary motion, a twitch of the eye, but Jace saw it. She looked down at her hands, her expression twisting with a sudden, sharp guilt. They are here for me, she said softly. Okay, Jace said. His voice was shaking, but he was moving, grabbing a stimulant injector and a portable med scanner. Okay, Plan B. What is Plan B? We lie, Jace said. We lie our asses off. He threw her a spare medical gown, a drab, shapeless thing made of green synthetic fiber. Put this on. Cover the markings on your skin. Why are you helping me? She asked, freezing halfway into the motion. I threatened to kill your friends. And now the people chasing you actually killed one of them, Jace said grimly. That makes you the lesser of two evils. Put the damn gown on. The clinic doors hissed open before she was fully settled. 3 figures stepped in. They were nightmares of chrome and black leather. 2 were human, Union operatives with dead eyes and pulse rifles. The third was tall, painfully thin, wearing a high-collared coat and dark glasses. He moved with a liquid grace that made Jace's skin crawl. Dr. Jace, the tall one said. His voice was like oil sliding over velvet. We are looking for a fugitive, a crash survivor. Jace stood in front of the surgical table, blocking their view of Lyra as best he could. He wiped his bloody hands on a rag, trying to look bored. I have a lot of patience, buddy. You're going to have to be more specific. And you owe me for the door mechanism you just forced. The tall man stepped closer. He lowered his glasses. His eyes were pale yellow. Where is the pilot? Jace gestured carelessly behind him. You mean the burn victim? Picked her up an hour ago. Shuttle malfunction. He stepped aside. Nyx lay on the table, the green gown pulled up to her chin. She looked small, frail. The tall man leaned over her. He sniffed the air, frowning. She smells wrong, the man said. Infection, Jace lied smoothly. Gamma rot, highly contagious. That is why the room is so cold. I am trying to freeze the bacteria. You get close enough to smell it. You are probably already breathing the spores. The 2 human operatives took a hasty step back. The tall creature hesitated. He leaned in closer to Nyx's face. Nyx's eyes were closed, but Jace saw her hand tighten on the fabric of the gown. Her muscles coiled. She was preparing to strike. If she moved, if she revealed herself, the room would turn into a slaughterhouse. The tall man reached out a gloved hand to touch her cheek. Jace stepped forward, jamming the tip of the medical scanner between the man's hand and Nyx's face. Do not, Jace snapped, unless you want your skin to slough off in sheets within the hour. I do not have enough quarantine beds for you 3. The tall man paused. He looked at the scanner, which Jace had rigged to display a terrifyingly high biohazard reading. He looked at Jace's tired, annoyed face. Then he sneered, pulling his hand back. Filth, he muttered. He turned to the operatives. Search the rest of the station. If the target is not here, she is hiding in the tunnels. Burn it all if you have to. They turned and marched out. The tall man lingered for 1 second more. his yellow eyes boring into Jace, before spinning on his heel and following them. The doors closed. For 10 seconds, neither Jace nor Nyx moved. Then Nyx let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Her legs gave out, and she slid off the table. Jace caught her. It was an instinctive reaction, the reflex of a medic. But the moment his arms went around her, the dynamic shifted. She was heavy against him, burning with a fever heat now instead of the cold. Her head fell onto his shoulder. Her armor had dissolved into her skin, leaving her in just the thin gown, and he could feel every tremor in her body. Nyx froze. Her face was pressed into the junction of his neck and shoulder. She could hear the thrum of his carotid artery. The sound was deafening to her enhanced senses. Thump, 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 thump. The smell of him, sweat, coffee, antiseptic, and the rich iron tang of living blood filled her nose. The hunger hit her like a physical blow. Her fangs ached to descend. It would be so easy. He was soft. He was right there. One bite, and she would have the strength to kill the assassins, the strength to heal, the strength to rule. She tensed, her fingers curling into claws against his back. Jace did not pull away. He did not cringe. Instead, he shifted his grip to support her better. He leaned his head forward until his forehead rested against hers. "Breathe," he whispered. "Just breathe." They are gone. The contact shocked her. It was not a grapple. It was not a prelude to violence. It was a gesture of profound, baffling intimacy. He was not afraid. Or rather, he was terrified. She could smell the cortisol spiking in his sweat, but he was choosing to hold her anyway. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling with the effort of not tearing his throat out. "I could kill you. You will not," Jace said. His voice was steady, vibrating through her skull where they touched. "You are not a monster. Lyra, you are just a patient, and I have never lost a patient yet." The lie was kind. They both knew it was a lie. He had lost plenty of patience, and she was definitely a monster, but the kindness of it shattered her resolve. She sagged against him, the predatory tension draining away, leaving only exhaustion. For a moment, the legendary vampire queen, the scourge of the galaxy, simply let herself be held by a human man with coffee breath and shaking hands. "We have to go," Jace said, pulling back gently. He kept his hands on her arms, stabilizing her. "Go?" she asked, blinking. "They will figure it out," Jace said. "That guy, the tall one, he was not convinced. He is going to check the logs. He is going to realize gamma rot does not exist in this sector. They will be back in 10 minutes, and they will bring heavier weapons." "You must leave me," Nyx said, finding her footing. "Run. Take an escape pod, and leave you to them?" Jace shook his head. He began tearing off his bloodied lab coat, revealing a faded flight suit underneath. "Not happening. If you stay with me, you die," Nyx said, her voice rising. "Do you not understand? I am hunted by the entire galaxy. There is no safety with me. There is only war." Jace stopped. He looked around his clinic. He looked at the flickering light panel, the coffee stain on the desk, the life he had built out of scrap and solitude to hide from his own memories of the war. He thought of Silas, bleeding out on the docking bay floor because of a war he did not understand. "They killed Silas," Jace said quietly. He looked at Nyx. "I am done hiding," he said. "And I am certainly done letting bullies in leather coats decide who lives and who dies." He grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing in med packs, stims, and ration bars. "My ship is in Hangar 3. It is a piece of junk. The hyperdrive leaks, and it smells like wet dog. But it is fast enough." "Jace," Nyx started, using his name for the first time. "Do not argue with your doctor," Jace said, zipping the bag. He threw it over his shoulder and offered her a hand. Come on. This is officially the worst house call of my entire life. Nix looked at his hand. It was scarred, calloused, and open. She took it. They ran. They sprinted through the maintenance tunnels, bypassing the main corridors where the assassins were tearing apart the habitation modules. Jace knew every loose grate and hidden ladder on the station. They burst into Hangar 3 just as the station alarm shifted from orange to red. There it is, Jace yelled, pointing to a battered, boxy vessel that looked more like a flying brick than a starship. The Hippocratic Oath. It is hideous, Nix said, though she ran alongside him up the ramp. It has character. Jace punched the launch sequence into the keypad. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The clamps released. As the ship lifted off the deck, Jace saw the hangar doors blast open. The three assassins stood there, firing pulse rounds that pinged harmlessly off the hull. Jace grabbed the yoke and punched the throttle. The Hippocratic Oath shot out of the magnetic field, tumbling into the asteroid belt. Hold on, Jace shouted. He navigated the debris field with a reckless skill that belied his earlier exhaustion, spinning the ship between spinning rocks and ice clouds. Behind them, the station dwindled to a speck of light against the darkness of the void. They cleared the belt and hit open space. Jace engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines of infinite light, and the ship lurched into the slipstream, leaving the outpost and Jace's quiet life far behind. Silence descended on the cockpit. Jace slumped back in the pilot's seat, his heart rate slowly returning to double digits. He looked over at Nix. She was staring out the viewport at the swirling colors of hyperspace, her reflection in the glass looking like a ghost. So, Jace said, his voice cracking slightly. Lyra, where are we going? Nix turned to him. The red in her eyes had dimmed to a deep, sorrowful violet. To the end of the world, she said softly. And then, a little further. Jace sighed, rubbing his temples. Great, he muttered. I hope they have coffee there. The interior of the Hippocratic Oath smelled of recycled oxygen, ozone, and the persistent nutty aroma of stale coffee grounds. It was a smell Jace had lived with for 5 years, ever since he had bought the decommissioned med-evac shuttle from a scrapyard on Titan. It was the smell of home. To Nix, however, it seemed to be the smell of purgatory. For the last 3 days, the two of them had been trapped in the metal belly of the ship as it limped through the interstellar void. The space was barely large enough for Jace alone, with a 6-foot-tall alien warrior occupying the co-pilot's seat. The cabin felt microscopic. Jace kicked a pile of dirty laundry under his bunk and squeezed past the navigational console. A half-eaten protein bar crunched under his boot. He winced. Nix did not move. She sat with her back perfectly straight, her hands resting on her knees, staring at the swirling hyperspace tunnel outside the viewport. She had not moved in 4 hours. She looked like a statue carved from obsidian and moonlight, utterly out of place among Jace's peeling bulkhead stickers and taped-up conduit pipes. You know, Jace said, grabbing a roll of gray duct tape from the counter. You could blink occasionally. It would make me feel less like I am hauling a corpse across state lines. Nix turned her head slowly. Her movement was fluid, lacking the microscopic jitters of human motor control. Conservation of energy, she said. Her voice was cool, detached, and your vessel vibrates at a frequency that suggests imminent structural failure. I am monitoring the hull integrity. The hull is fine, Jace muttered, tearing off a strip of tape with his teeth. He slapped it over a hissing seal on the air recycler. It just has personality. Not everyone can afford silent, brooding stealth ships made of magic space glass. It was biocrystalline armor, Nix corrected. And it was not silent. It sang. Right, it sang. Jace rolled his eyes, tossing the tape back onto a pile of medical journals. Well, down here in the cheap seats, we listened to the song of loose bolts. He watched her as he worked. She was doing something with a small, intricate device she had pried out of her ruined armor. It looked like a compass made of bone and circuitry. She adjusted the dials with micrometric precision, her brow furrowed. "Trying to call home?" Jace asked. "I am trying to find a route that will not get us incinerated," she said. "The vampire trade lanes are shifting. The navigational buoys have been moved. It is erratic." She set the device down and rubbed her temples. The motion was so human it caught Jace off guard. For a second, the mask of the terrifying warrior slipped, revealing someone exhausted and lost. "You look pale," Jace observed, stepping closer, paler than usual. I am fine. Your hands are shaking. Lyra, they are not." They were. A subtle tremor, like a leaf in a breeze. Jace reached out to check her pulse, but she pulled her wrist away sharply. "Do not touch me," she snapped. Jace held up his hands in surrender. "Okay, touchy, I get it. Just trying to be your doctor." "I do not need a doctor," she said, turning back to the viewport. "I need silence." Jace sighed and retreated to the galley. He brewed a fresh pot of sludge, watching her back. The tension in the ship was thick enough to chew. It was not just fear of the assassins trailing them. It was the friction of two different species forced into a closet. She was regal, precise, and predatory. He was messy, chaotic, and relentlessly human. He picked up a hollow photo from the dashboard, a picture of his old unit, smiling in front of a dropship before the massacre at Ridgeway. He wiped a thumb over the glass. "Hey, Your Highness," Jace called out, trying to break the heavy silence. "You want a ration bar? I have strawberry synthesis or chocolate chalk." Nix did not answer. A low growl emanated from her throat, a sound so deep it vibrated the deck plates. Jace froze. That was not a stomach rumble. That was the sound a tiger made before pouncing. He looked at her reflection in the glass. Her eyes were flickering. The solid crimson was pulsing, brightening and dimming like a warning beacon. She was gripping the armrests of the chair so hard the metal was beginning to warp. Jace frowned. He tapped the console, bringing up the encrypted news feeds he had been leeching from the Union boys. Maybe distraction was the best medicine. "You might want to see this," he said, his voice dropping the playful edge. Nix exhaled slowly, mastering herself, and swiveled the chair. "What is it?" Jace gestured to the main screen. The image was grainy, a pirated signal from the core worlds. It showed a burning city. Skyscrapers were toppling into a sea of fire. In the sky above the destruction, a massive silhouette loomed, a ship shaped like a dagger. The ticker at the bottom read, "Vampire Queen Nyx Arathiel devastates colony of Jericho 7th. Union declares total war." Nyx went rigid. Jericho 7th. Jace read, "The attack happened 6 hours ago." Nyx stood up. She moved to the screen, her movements jerky and stiff. "Impossible." "Yeah," Jace said. "Since 6 hours ago, you were unconscious on my table, drooling on my best pillow. Unless you have a twin sister or can bilocate, that is not you." Nyx stared at the screen. The camera zoomed in on a figure standing on the balcony of the attacking ship. It was a woman in black bio-armor, pale, with flowing dark hair. She raised a hand, and purple lightning arced down to strike a hospital. "It is a phantom," Nyx whispered. The word hissed through her teeth. "An actor, A construct. She looked at her own hands, her claws extending involuntarily. They are using my face. They are using my name to slaughter innocents. Why? Jace asked. If the Union and the vampires are working together, why frame you? Because they need a monster, Nyx said. Her voice trembled with a rage so profound it dropped the temperature in the cabin by 10 degrees. Peace is difficult to sell. Jace, it requires compromise. But fear is easy. If the galaxy believes the vampire queen has gone mad, that she is a rabid dog that needs to be put down, they will accept anything. They will accept martial law. They will accept the Shadow Fleet. They will accept a new regime that promises to save them from me. She turned away from the screen, pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps. Turn. Who are you, really? Jace asked quietly. Nyx stopped. She did not look at him. I told you I am Lyra. Jace shook his head. No. Lyra does not know the specific navigational buoys of the vampire trade lanes. Lyra does not speak High Gothic in her sleep. And Lyra does not look at a video of the vampire queen with personal offense. You take it personally, like they are wearing your clothes. He stepped closer, invading her space. You are not just a mercenary. You were one of her generals, weren't you? High command. Maybe her personal guard. Nyx hesitated. The lie hung in the air, fragile. She could tell him the truth. She could tell him that she was the monster in the news, the architect of the century of war that had broken him. But if she did, he would look at her with the same eyes the rest of the galaxy used, eyes filled with hate. And for some reason, the thought of Jace looking at her with hate was unbearable. Yes, she said, seizing the lifeline he offered. I was a general. I commanded her vanguard. I served her for 200 years. She looked him in the eye, channeling just enough truth to make the lie unbreakable. And I know she would not attack Jericho 7. She was a tyrant, Jace. She was ruthless. But she was not a butcher of children. She had a code. This is something else. Jace studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, General. Then let us go prove it. He sat back in the pilot's chair and punched a sequence into the nav computer. There is a distress beacon, Jace said. Faint. Coming from the edge of the Jericho system, a freighter listed as the Golden Hind. It was reported destroyed in the initial wave, but the transponder is still pinging. If we go there, we risk exposure, Nyx warned. If we do not, we have no proof, Jace countered. And honestly, I am tired of running blind. Let us go see who is really pulling the trigger. The Golden Hind was a grave. It drifted in the silent dark of the nebula, its hull cracked open like a broken egg. Debris floated in a halo around it, cargo crates, frozen atmosphere, and bodies. Jace parked the Hippocratic Oath in the shadow of the wreckage, keeping their energy signature low. He and Nyx suited up, Jace in his battered, patched EVA suit, Nyx in a spare breathing mask he had modified to fit her physiology. She did not need a full suit. Her skin was dense enough to withstand the vacuum for short periods. They pushed off from the airlock, drifting through the silence of space toward the jagged tear in the freighter's side. Inside, the gravity was gone. Floating globules of blood, red human blood, suspended in the air like rubies. Watch your head, Jace said over the comms, his voice tinny in her ear. Nyx did not answer. She was scanning the bulkheads. The scorch marks were distinctive. Plasma burns, she murmured. Concentrated. Precision fire. This was not a rampage. Jace agreed, examining a wall. This was a boarding action. They floated toward the bridge, The internal camera logs were usually hardwired into the command console. If they had survived the blast, they might hold the truth. Jace hacked the terminal, his fingers dancing over his wrist pad. Got it. The backup drive is fried, but the local cache is intact. Playing it now. A holographic projection flickered into life above the console. It showed the bridge of the Golden Hind 3 days ago. The crew was screaming. The blast doors melted. Soldiers poured in. Jace gasped. The soldiers were wearing Union infantry armor, the standard issue gray and blue that Jace himself had worn for a decade. But their weapons were wrong. They carried jagged, organic rifles that fired bolts of crimson energy. Vampire tech, Jace whispered. Union soldiers using vampire weapons. Wait, Nick said. Look closer. She pointed to the leader of the boarding party. He removed his helmet. He was human. He turned to the camera, smiled, and threw a canister into the center of the room. Purple gas exploded outward. The crew did not die immediately. They began to change. Their veins turned black. Their eyes melted. Their bodies contorting into feral, mindless beasts that tore each other apart. A bioweapon, Jace said, his voice sick. They turned them into ghouls, and they will blame it on the Queen's magic. Nyx was trembling. This was a desecration. It was a crude, chemical mockery of the sacred blood-turning her people practiced. There, she said, pointing to the edge of the hologram. A few crew members had escaped the gas. They had fled into a reinforced cargo locker. Jace checked his scanner. Life signs. Faint, but there. They are still here, he said. Trapped in the locker. The air is running out. They pushed off the walls, swimming through the zero-gravity wreckage toward the cargo bay. The door to the locker was a massive slab of durasteel, buckled by the explosion and fused shut by the heat. Jace clamped his magnetic boots to the floor and tried the manual release. It would not budge. He attached a laser cutter. It is too thick, he shouted. The cutter will take 20 minutes. They have maybe 5 minutes of air left. Stand back, Nyx ordered. She floated in front of the door. She placed her hands on the warped metal. She closed her eyes. Jace watched as the veins in her neck bulged. Her skin began to glow with a faint, terrifying luminescence. Nyx pushed. She did not use leverage. She did not use hydraulics. She used raw, supernatural force. Her muscles coiled, tight as steel cables. A guttural scream tore from her throat, a sound of pure exertion that vibrated through the ship's hull. The durasteel groaned, then it screamed, with a sound like a thunderclap. The metal sheared. Nyx ripped the 3-ton door from its hinges and shoved it aside as if it were made of cardboard. The air rushed out from the locker, but Jace was ready. He grabbed the terrified survivors, a family of Twi'lek refugees, and tethered them to his suit. I have them, Jace yelled. He looked back at Nyx. She was floating in the center of the bay, limp. Her glow had faded, her eyes were rolled back in her head. Nyx! He grabbed her tether and hauled her toward the exit, back on the Hippocratic Oath. The chaos quieted down. Jace had settled the survivors in the cargo hold with blankets and oxygen masks. They were traumatized, but alive. He found Nyx in the cockpit. She had collapsed onto the floor, her back against the co-pilot's seat. She was shaking violently. Her skin was gray, translucent, the veins beneath showing black and starved. Jace dropped to his knees beside her. He scanned her with his medical wand. The device shrieked errors. System failure, Jace muttered. Metabolic collapse. Lyra, talk to me. What is happening? Is it the radiation? Nyx shook her head weakly. Her teeth were chattering. Not. Radiation. She gasped. Energy. Too much. Output. Reserves. Empty. She looked at him, and Jace recoiled. Her eyes were not just red, they were black holes with rings of fire. Her fangs were fully extended, glistening. She looked less like a woman and more like a starving shark. "I need," she whispered. "What?" Jace asked, frantic. "Glucose? Adrenaline? I have a synthetic blood substitute." "No!" She knocked the med kit from his hand. It clattered across the deck. "Synthetics will not work. Not for this. I used the deep strength. It requires life." She curled in on herself, clutching her stomach. "Go away, Jace. Lock the door. When if I do not feed, I will lose control. I will hunt." Jace froze. The realization hit him like a cold bucket of water. She was dying of hunger, and she was a vampire. He looked at the door to the cargo hold where the refugee family was huddled. If she lost control, she would tear through that bulkhead like paper. She would slaughter them. He looked at Nyx. She was shivering, trying to claw herself away from him, trying to protect him from herself. Jace exhaled. He made a choice. He rolled up the sleeve of his flight suit. "Here," he said. Nyx's head snapped up. She stared at his bare forearm, at the blue vein pulsing beneath the skin. Her nostrils flared. "What are you doing? You need fuel," Jace said. His voice shook, but his arm stayed steady. "I am the only fuel station around." "You are human," she hissed. "You are fragile. If I take, I might not stop. I could drain you dry before I even realize it." "You won't," Jace said. "How do you know?" "Because you ripped a steel door off its hinges to save strangers," Jace said. "Because you told me to run. You are not a monster. Lyra, you just have a dietary restriction." He moved his arm closer. "On my terms," he said firmly. "Or not at all. I say stop. You stop." Nyx stared at the offering. The scent of his blood was overwhelming. It smelled of life, of salt, of the very essence of the stars. It was a siren song she had resisted for days, and now it was right there, surrendered willingly. She reached out. Her claws grazed his skin, sharp as scalpels, but her touch was agonizingly gentle. She pulled his arm toward her. Jace stopped breathing. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, asking for final permission. "Do it," he whispered. She opened her mouth and struck. It was not painful. That was the most terrifying part. There was a sharp pinch, and then a rush of cold, followed by a wave of heat that rolled up Jace's arm and exploded in his chest. It was euphoria. It was a chemical hack, a predator's trick to keep the prey docile. Jace's head fell back against the console. He gasped, his fingers digging into Nyx's shoulder. He could feel her drinking. He could feel the rhythmic pull of his life force leaving his body, flowing into hers. It was intimate in a way that made sex feel like a handshake. It was a total merging of biology. He felt her fear. He felt her desperate relief. He felt the ancient, heavy power waking up inside her, knitting her cells back together. Nyx closed her eyes, lost in the taste of him. He tasted like ozone and stubbornness. He tasted like mercy. The hunger roared, demanding she take it all, demanding she crack the bone and drink the marrow. "Stop," a voice in her head whispered. "He is Jace. He is Jace." With a monumental effort of will, she unlatched. She pulled back, gasping, her mouth stained with red. She licked her lips, catching a stray drop. Jace slumped sideways, the world spinning. Nyx caught him before he hit the deck. "I got you," she murmured, her voice rich and strong again. Jace blinked, trying to focus on her face. The gray was gone. She was radiant. Her skin glowed with a subtle, pearlescent sheen. She looked terrifyingly beautiful. "Wow," Jace slurred. "Okay. That was something." He tried to sit up and failed. Nyx held him against her chest, her hand stroking his hair. "I took too much," she said, anxiety creeping back into her tone. "You are dizzy." "I am fine," Jace managed. "Just lightheaded." He looked at the 2 puncture marks on his arm. They were already closing, sealed by her saliva. "So," he said, a crooked grin forming on his face. "Usually, a guy buys a girl dinner before he lets her eat him. We should probably have the first bite talk." Nyx stared at him. She looked at the blood on his arm, the trust in his eyes, and the sheer, absurd bravery of his humor. A bubble of laughter rose in her chest. It felt foreign, rusty. She tried to suppress it, but it escaped, a genuine musical laugh that transformed her face from a mask of war into something young and alive. "You are an idiot." "Jace," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "An absolute idiot. I prefer dedicated medical professional," Jace corrected, closing his eyes. An hour later, Jace had consumed 3 juice boxes and a packet of iron supplements. He sat at the galley table, watching Nyx pace. She was fully restored, her movements sharp and energized. "The survivors told me something," Jace said. "Before they passed out." Nyx stopped. "What?" They heard the soldiers talking. "About a summit." "A summit?" "In the Vega sector, a neutral station. The Union High Command and the vampire aristocracy are meeting in 3 days. They are going to sign the Treaty of Unification, the treaty that legalizes the Shadow Fleet." Nyx realized. The formal surrender of human liberty in exchange for protection. "And," Jace added, his voice grim, "the centerpiece of the ceremony is an execution. They are going to execute the captured vampire queen." Nyx's eyes narrowed. "They are going to kill the body double, to prove the threat is gone, and then the council will rule in my name forever." She walked to the airlock and began calibrating her armor. "I have to go," she said. "I know," Jace said. "We have to stop them." "No," Nyx said, turning to him. "I have to go. You are dropping me off at the nearest relay station." Jace frowned. "Excuse me? This is vampire politics. Jace, it is a pit of vipers. If I walk into that summit, there will be blood. Oceans of it. You are a human medic with a broken ship. You are a liability." Jace stood up. "A liability? I just fed you my own blood to keep you from eating the passengers. I think I have earned a seat at the table. You do not understand." Nyx stepped forward, her intensity blazing. "If you come with me, the council will use you against me. They will smell your scent on me. They will know I have bonded with a human. It will make me look weak. It will get you killed." "Bonded?" Jace caught the word. Nyx looked away, flustered. "It is a term for the feeding. It creates a connection." "Look," Jace said, stepping into her personal space again. He was learning that she respected defiance more than obedience. "I have seen the news. Lyra, or General, or whoever you are. I have seen what this alliance does. They gas crews. They bomb colonies. If this summit happens, the war I fought in, the war that ruined me, it will look like a playground fight compared to what comes next." He pointed at the puncture wounds on his arm. "You are the only person who can stop it. But you cannot fly this ship, hack the Union grid, and watch your own back at the same time. You need a second." "I do not need a human," Nyx snarled. "You need this human," Jace shot back. They glared at each other. The air crackled with the strange, volatile energy that had been building between them since the crash, a mix of gratitude, anger, and a magnetic pull neither wanted to name. Nyx looked at his stubborn jaw, his tired eyes, the bandage on his arm. She felt the echo of his heartbeat in her own blood. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that he was right. She did not want to leave him, and that terrified her more than any assassin. "Fine," she whispered. "Fine. We go to Vega. We crash the summit." Nyx leaned in, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But if you die, Jace, I will never forgive you." Jace smiled, the tension breaking. "Deal. Now, get in the co-pilot seat. We have a galaxy to save, and the coffee is getting cold." The obsidian dagger did not hum like a machine. It breathed. Jace sat on the edge of what passed for a bunk in the captain's quarters, staring suspiciously at the wall. The material was not metal. It was a slick black substance that looked like polished volcanic glass but felt warm to the touch. Every few seconds, a faint ripple of crimson light pulsed through the veins embedded deep within the hull, accompanied by a sound that was less like an engine cycle and more like a massive, slow heartbeat. "If this ship tries to digest me while I am sleeping," Jace muttered to the empty room, "I am going to be very upset." He stood up, his boots making a soft, wet sound on the deck. They had transferred to the vessel 12 hours ago, locating it in a dormant orbital cache that Nyx remembered from her conquest days. It was a stealth corvette from the Second Era, grown rather than built, bonded specifically to her genetic code. The door to the cockpit slid open, not with a mechanical hiss, but with the squelch of a muscular valve relaxing. Nyx walked in. She looked different here. On the Hippocratic oath, she had been a refugee, cramped and out of place among his clutter. Here, surrounded by the bioluminescent darkness of her own technology, she was terrifyingly regal. The ship responded to her presence. The lights flared brighter as she passed, and the air circulation ramped up as if the vessel was excited she was home. "We are crossing the border into the tenebrous sector," Nyx said. Her voice carried a natural reverb in the acoustic perfection of the room. "We will arrive at the Crimson Market in 2 hours." "Great," Jace said, rubbing the back of his neck. "The Crimson Market. Sounds like a delightful place. Do they sell fruit, or is it mostly just organs and despair?" "It is a moon bazaar," Nyx said, ignoring his tone. "Neutral ground. It is where the bloodless caste trades information for scraps of power. We will find a contact there who knows the layout of the summit." She walked over to a console that looked like a pedestal of black coral. She placed her hand on it, and tendrils of light wrapped around her fingers, interfacing directly with her nervous system. "You need to understand what we are walking into." "Jace," she said, not looking at him. "You grew up in the Union. You think of vampires as monsters in stories. But our society is not a chaos of beasts. It is a machine, a rigid, unbreakable hierarchy." She gestured to the air, and a holographic projection manifested, a pyramid of red light. "At the top are the high houses," she explained, "the pure bloodlines. They hold the wealth, the fleets, the technology. Below them are the soldiers, bred for war, then the commoners, and at the bottom, the thralls." Jace finished. "The bloodless," Nyx corrected. "Those who have failed to manifest strong gifts. They are the laborers, the servants. In my court, everyone had a place. Everyone had a purpose. It was order. It was slavery," Jace said. Nyx turned to him, her eyes flashing. "It was stability. Before I unified the houses, the galaxy burned for 1,000 years. Warlords tore entire systems apart for sport. I stopped the bleeding. I imposed the silence. Yes, I ruled with fear. I executed dissidents. I made examples of rebels. But I stopped the chaos." Jace leaned against the warm, breathing wall. He crossed his arms. "You sound like a surgeon who amputates the head to cure a headache," he said quietly. Nyx stiffened. "Do not lecture me on governance. Human. You do not have the perspective of centuries. You see a life. I see a civilization. Sometimes cruelty is the only gravity strong enough to hold a world together. It is a necessary evil. I saw a lot of necessary evils in the war, Jace said. His voice was devoid of its usual humor. I had a commanding officer at the siege of Orestes. He said we had to bomb the civilian shelters to deny the enemy cover. Said it was the only way to save the city in the long run. And? Nyx asked. Challenged. We saved the city, Jace said. But there was nobody left living in it to celebrate. The necessary evil grew until it ate the whole purpose of the fight. He pushed off the wall and stepped closer to her. You built a throne on fear, Nyx. And the moment you showed weakness, the moment you bled on my table, that fear evaporated. And now the people you terrified are coming to finish the job. That is not stability. That is just a time bomb waiting for a match. Nyx stared at him. She wanted to strike him, to silence the insolence that no one had dared speak to her in 300 years. But the ship pulsed around them, sensing her distress, and the walls whispered in high Gothic, mimicking her own doubt. She looked down at her hand on the console. She remembered the child on the refugee planet, the stone hitting her temple. She remembered the fear in the eyes of the family she had saved on the freighter. We will discuss philosophy later, she said, her voice tight. Right now, we have a role to play. She reached into a storage recess and pulled out a heavy, ornate collar made of silver and onyx. If you are to walk through the Crimson Market without being slaughtered, you cannot be Jace the medic. You must be property. Jace looked at the collar. Then he looked at Nyx. You have got to be kidding me. It is the only way, Nyx said. A human walking freely is prey. A human belonging to a highborn is a status symbol. You will walk 2 steps behind me. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will keep your eyes on the ground. She held the collar out. Trust me, Jace. Jace sighed. He took the collar. It was heavy, cold, and humiliating. Fine, he said, snapping it around his neck. It clicked shut with a sound of finality. But if you start enjoying this, I am charging you double for the next transfusion. The Crimson Market was a sensory assault, carved into the hollowed-out core of a dead moon. The bazaar was a vertical city of neon lights, hanging platforms, and smoke that smelled of incense and iron. Gravity here was low, allowing the patrons to leap between walkways in slow, graceful arcs. Nyx walked through the crowd like a knife cutting through silk. She wore a hooded cloak of midnight blue spider silk that obscured her face but accentuated the terrifying grace of her movements. She projected an aura of menace so potent that the crowd parted before her without her saying a word. Jace walked 2 paces behind, holding the end of a silver chain that Nyx had attached to his collar. He felt ridiculous. He felt angry. And despite himself, he felt a spike of adrenaline at the way Nyx commanded the space. The market was full of nightmares. There were stalls selling vials of emotions harvested from psychics. There were weapon merchants displaying blades that vibrated at ultrasonic frequencies. There were creatures Jace could not name, vampires with wings like bats, others with shark-like gills, all moving with a predator's confidence. Keep your head down. Nyx's voice echoed in his mind. She was using a telepathic link, a trick of the bioarmor. Do not look them in the eye. Yes, mistress, Jace mumbled, keeping his gaze on her boots. A group of rowdy soldiers from the Iron House blocked their path. They were large, hulking brutes with cybernetic jaws. Well, look at this, one of them sneered, stepping close to Jace. A prime vintage. He smells healthy. He reached out a clawed hand to touch Jace's face. Nyx did not break stride. She simply flicked her wrist. The chain attached to Jace's collar snapped taut, pulling him back, while her other hand shot out and grabbed the soldier's wrist. She did not squeeze. She simply applied pressure to a specific nerve cluster. The soldier howled, dropping to his knees. "He is not for touching," Nyx said. Her voice was low, distorted by the modulator in her hood, sounding like grinding stones. "He is a private reserve." The soldier looked up, ready to fight, but then he saw the sigil Nyx flashed on her palm, a forgery of a high-ranking executioner. He paled. "Apologies, my lord," he stammered. Nyx released him. He scrambled away, his friends following quickly. Jace let out a breath he had been holding. "Nice grip," he whispered. "Silence. Pet," Nyx said aloud, giving the chain a sharp tug. She leaned in close, her fingers tangling in his hair, tilting his head back to expose his throat to the onlookers. It was a display of ownership, a warning to the crowd that this human was claimed. Jace felt her cold breath on his skin. Her thumb traced the line of his jaw. It was an act. He knew it was an act, but the intimacy of it sent a jolt of heat straight to his groin. He looked up, meeting her hidden gaze beneath the hood. "You are playing this part a little too well," he whispered through gritted teeth. "And you are blushing," Nyx whispered back, her voice laced with a dark, teasing amusement. "Focus. Jace. We are being watched." She released him and swept forward toward a secluded booth at the edge of the market, suspended over a seemingly bottomless drop into the moon's core. The contact was waiting. He was a spindly creature wrapped in bandages sitting before a table covered in data shards. This was Vex, a broker of secrets who had served Nyx during the Unity Wars. "Vex," Nyx said, sitting opposite him. Jace knelt by her chair, as instructed, hating every second of it. "The hooded one," Vex rasped. "You carry the scent of old wars. What do you seek?" "I seek the agenda of the summit," Nyx said. "I hear the Shadow Council plans a spectacle." "Information is expensive," Vex said, tapping his clawed fingers on the table. "The price is blood. Fresh." He pointed a finger at Jace. "From the pet." Jace tensed. Nyx did not flinch. "He is not for consumption," Nyx said coldly. "He is for my amusement. I will pay in credits. Imperial mint." Vex laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Credits are dust here. But for you, I might make an exception. I know who you are underneath that hood. The gait is unmistakable." Vex leaned forward. "The Queen lives." Nyx went still. She slowly lowered her hood. "If you know me, Vex, then you know what I am capable of. Talk." Vex nodded, seemingly unbothered by the threat. "The summit is a stage. The council has built a narrative. They say the Queen is mad, that she has returned to destroy the peace. To counter this, they have developed a solution, a final solution." He slid a data shard across the table. Project Absolution, a nanite swarm, but not a weapon of war, a culling tool. "Explain," Nyx commanded. "It is tuned to genetic markers," Vex explained. "It targets the weak, the sick, the bloodless, the humans. Anyone deemed inefficient. They plan to release it at the summit. They will blame it on your dead man's switch. They will say you released a plague in your death throes, and that only the Council's military rule can stop it." Nyx's hand clenched into a fist. "They are going to wipe out half the galaxy and blame my ghost. It is elegant," Vex admitted. "Pure terror, just like the old days." Before Nyx could respond, a laser bolt shattered the glass on the table. Vex's head vanished in a mist of blue vapor. "Sniper!" Jace yelled, tackling Nyx out of the chair just as a second shot punched through the seat where she had been. The market exploded into chaos. From the shadows of the upper gantries, figures descended on gravity lines. They were clad in the armor of the Royal Guard, Nyx's own elite protectors. now turned assassins. Jace scrambled up, ripping the collar from his neck. So much for the disguise. Nyx was already moving. She summoned the shadows of the market, weaving them into solid whips. She struck the first assassin mid-air, slamming him into a neon sign that sparked and showered the crowd with glass. "They found us!" Nyx shouted. "Get to the ship! We cannot just leave!" Jace yelled. He pointed. The assassins were firing indiscriminately. A stray plasma bolt had hit a support strut, and a platform full of civilians, human traders, and bloodless workers was collapsing. Jace ran toward the platform. "Jace!" Nyx screamed. Jace ignored her. He slid under a chaotic melee between two vampire brawlers and reached the edge of the crumbling walkway. A Twi'lek mother was dangling by one hand, holding a child. Jace grabbed her wrist. He groaned, the strain on his muscles immense as the gravity plating fluctuated. "Pull!" he gritted out. He hauled them up just as the platform gave way, tumbling into the abyss. An assassin landed in front of him. The vampire grinned, baring fangs, raising a vibroblade. Jace did not have a weapon. He had a med kit. He grabbed a flashbang grenade from his belt, standard issue for crowd control in panic situations, and pulled the pin. "Eat light, ugly!" He tossed it at the vampire's feet and squeezed his eyes shut. The grenade detonated with a blinding magnesium flare and a sonic boom. The assassin, whose eyes were adapted for the dark, shrieked, clutching his face. Jace kicked him in the knee, shattering the joint, and then spun to check on the civilians. "Stay down," he ordered. "Cover your heads." He deployed a portable barrier shield, a small disc that expanded into a translucent wall of energy, protecting the huddled group from the crossfire. Across the market, Nyx was a whirlwind of violence. She decapitated one attacker with a kinetic blast, tore the throat out of another. She was efficient, brutal, and terrifying. But then she looked across the carnage, and she saw Jace. He was not killing. He was shielding. He was dragging a wounded shopkeeper behind the barrier. He was using a sonic dampener to disorient an attacker so a group of thralls could escape. The vampires in the crowd, the bystanders who were used to violence as entertainment, stopped to watch. They stared at the human who was fighting not for dominance, but for the lives of strangers. It was a kind of power they had never seen. Nyx felt a strange pang in her chest, a mixture of pride and shame. She let out a roar, a command voice that shattered windows. "Enough!" She unleashed a shockwave of telekinetic force, blasting the remaining 3 assassins backward, pinning them against the rock wall. She stood in the center of the market, her eyes glowing with the full power of the queen. The market fell silent. Nyx looked at the pinned assassins. "Tell the council," she said, her voice ice cold. "Tell them I am coming, and tell them I am not alone." She gestured to Jace. "We are leaving." Jace grabbed the data shard from Vex's corpse and ran to her side. The crowd parted for them again, but this time, the fear in their eyes was mixed with something else. Confusion. Wonder. They watched the human man and the monster walk away together. The obsidian dagger was quiet, save for the hum of the hyperdrive. They had jumped away from the moon system, putting light years between them and the assassins. But the silence in the ship was heavy. Jace was in the med bay, treating a burn on his arm from a stray plasma bolt. He was running a dermal regenerator over the skin, wincing slightly. The door opened. Nyx stood there. She had removed her cloak and armor. She was wearing a simple tunic, her hair loose. She looked smaller, stripped of her queenly persona. She walked in and took the regenerator from his hand. "Let me," she said softly. She worked in silence for a moment, her cool fingers soothing on his heated skin. "You could have died," she said. "You stopped to save cattle. They were people, Jace said tiredly. To the galaxy, they are numbers, Nyx said. To the council, they are waste. And to you? Jace asked. Nyx stopped. She looked at the burn. I built a world where they were numbers, she whispered. Vex was right. The Shadow Council, their plan, it is just an evolution of what I did. I culled the weak to strengthen the whole. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself it was necessary. She looked up at Jace, and her eyes were swimming with tears, silver, shimmering tears that looked like mercury. I am the monster. Jace. They are just following in my footsteps. Maybe the galaxy would be better off if I let them kill me. Maybe my death is the only thing that can balance the scales. Jace stood up. He took her face in his hands. No, he said firmly. He forced her to look at him. The monster is the one who kills without thought. The monster is the one who sees a mother dangling over a cliff and sees a statistic. That is not you. Not anymore. He wiped a silver tear from her cheek with his thumb. I watched you in that market, Jace said. You could have slaughtered everyone there to get to the assassins. You didn't. You controlled it. You held back. Because you were watching, Nyx confessed. Because I did not want you to see me as a beast. Then keep looking at me, Jace said. If I am your conscience, fine. Use me. But do not you dare give up. The galaxy does not need a martyr. Nyx. It needs a leader who knows how to fix her mistakes. Nyx looked at him. This fragile, stubborn human man who had walked into a den of wolves and refused to bite. She felt a surge of emotion so powerful it terrified her more than the hunger. It was gratitude. It was awe. It was desire. She leaned into his touch. Her hands came up to grip his waist, pulling him closer. Jace, she breathed. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static. The pulsing of the ship's walls seemed to synchronize with their heartbeats. Jace looked at her lips. He saw the hesitation, the fear, and the longing. He closed the distance. The kiss was not gentle. It was fierce, desperate. It was the collision of two worlds. Nyx tasted like cold stars and ancient wine. She kissed him with a hunger that had nothing to do with blood, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing him back against the exam table. Jace responded in kind, his hands sliding down her back, grounding her, holding her. He felt the power humming under her skin, the lethal strength she was holding in check for him. For a moment, they were lost in it. The barriers of species and history dissolved. There was only the heat of their bodies and the desperate need to be close. Then, Nyx stiffened. She pulled back with a gasp, shoving Jace away slightly. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes had flickered red. I cannot, she whispered, horror dawning on her face. Jace reached for her. Nyx, it is okay. No! She backed away, hitting the wall. I can smell your blood. My instincts, when I am this close to you, when I want you this much. The predator wakes up. I want to consume you, Jace. I want to tear you apart and keep you inside me forever. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. I will hurt you. I will lose control and I will kill the only thing in this universe that makes me feel human. Jace stood there, breathing hard, his lips swollen, his heart hammering. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes. He wanted to go to her, to tell her he trusted her, but he knew she was right. The line between her desire and her hunger was razor thin, and they were dancing on the edge of it. He took a step back, giving her space. He held up his hands, palms open. Okay, he said softly. Okay. We stop. Nyx slid down the wall to the floor, burying her face in her knees. I am sorry, she sobbed. I am so sorry. Jace sat down on the floor, 3 feet away from her. Close enough to be there, far enough to be safe. You do not have to apologize for who you are, he said. We have a choice. Nix. That is what you taught me today. Real power is not taking what you want just because you can. Real power is restraint. It is choosing not to bite. He looked at her with a sad, crooked smile. You stopped, Nix. You stopped yourself. That is the victory. Nix looked up. She saw the truth in his eyes. He was not afraid of her. He was proud of her. She wiped her face, composing herself. The red faded from her eyes, replaced by the deep, starry violet. We have to go to the summit, she said, her voice steadying. We have to expose the council. We have to stop the plague. Yes. Jace agreed. I will take the throne room, Nix said. I will face the High Lords. I will make them confess. And I will get to the control center, Jace said. I will upload the data from Vex's shard. I will show the galaxy what they are really planning. It is a suicide mission, Nix said. Jace shrugged. I am a medic. I fight death for a living. I am used to bad odds. He stood up and offered her a hand. Come on, partner. Let us go save the universe. Nix took his hand. This time, her grip was firm, controlled. She stood up. They held the contact for a second longer than necessary, a silent promise of what might happen later, when the war was won and the hunger was tamed. Then, the ship's comm system chimed, an urgent priority alert. Jace frowned. That is on the open frequency. He walked to the console and tapped the screen. A holographic bounty notice rotated in the air. It was a picture of Jace's face taken from the security footage at the outpost. Wanted. The text read in bold, galactic basic letters. Jace Callahan, rogue human medic. Jace squinted at the text below. Charges, conspiracy, terrorism, aiding a known enemy of the state. And then, the payout. Jace's eyes went wide. 5 million credits? He choked out. 5 million, that is more than the GDP of my home planet. Nix looked at the notice. A dark, dangerous smile curled her lips. It says you are a high-value target, she read. The Queen's pet. She looked at him, and for the first time in hours, there was a spark of genuine humor in her eyes. Congratulations, Jace. You are finally worth something. Jace groaned, burying his face in his hands. Great. Now every bounty hunter from here to the rim is going to be looking for me. I'm going to have to get a haircut, or plastic surgery. Or, Nix said, walking past him to the pilot's chair, her cloak billowing behind her. You could just stick with the deadliest woman in the galaxy and hope she likes you enough to keep you alive. She sat down and engaged the engines. The obsidian dagger roared to life, ready for war. Jace looked at her, at the way the lights reflected in her hair, at the straight line of her back. He smiled, terrified and exhilarated. I will take those odds, he said. He sat in the co-pilot seat and strapped in. Next stop, the summit. The journey to the summit system was a lesson in claustrophobia. The obsidian dagger was a massive vessel, capable of housing a crew of 50. But the silence between Jace and Nix made the corridors feel like the inside of a coffin. Paranoia had become their third passenger. Every time the proximity sensors chimed, Nix was at the console in a blur of motion, her claws extended, ready to tear the throat out of an unseen enemy. Every time they docked at a refueling relay to siphon hydrogen from gas giants. Jace was checking the seals on his vac suit 3 times, convinced a bounty hunter had rigged the airlock to blow. They were exhausted. They were terrified. And they were orbiting each other with a gravitational pull that was becoming impossible to ignore. You are pacing again, Jace said, not looking up from the ration pack he was trying to hydrate. You are going to wear a groove in the deck plating, and this ship is alive, so that probably counts as assault. Nix stopped. She stood by the viewport, the starlight casting long, jagged shadows across her face. We are exposed, she said. Her voice was tight. The council knows we are coming. Every jump we make leaves an ion trail. If they triangulate our position, and so then we fight, Jace said. He stirred the gray sludge in his bowl. Or run. We are getting good at running. Nix turned to him. Her eyes were dark, scanning him with a possessiveness that made the hair on his arms stand up. She walked over and adjusted the collar of his tunic, her fingers lingering over the pulse point in his neck. You are too slow to run, she murmured. If they board us, you stay behind me. You do not engage. You do not play hero. I am not a hero, Jace said, forcing himself not to lean into her touch. I am a 5 million credit bounty. I am basically a walking lottery ticket. I think I have a right to defend my own value. You are not a ticket, Nix snapped, her hand tightening on his shoulder. You are mine, and I do not lose what is mine. The air between them crackled. It was an argument, but it sounded like a vow. Before Jace could respond, the nav computer screamed, "Blockade detected." The ship's voice whispered in high Gothic. Nix spun to the console. 3 Union destroyers, she reported. They have locked down the hyperlane when we cannot jump through without being vaporized. We need a detour, Jace said, abandoning his food. Where are we? Nix brought up the star chart. Sector 4. There is a habitable planet in the gravity well. Orestes Prime. Jace froze. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Orestes, he repeated. You know it? I served there, Jace said quietly. During the siege. It was bad. It is the only place to hide until the blockade passes, Nix said. We can lay low in the atmospheric interference. She initiated the landing sequence. The ship banked hard, diving toward the gray-brown sphere rotating below them. Jace strapped in, closing his eyes, preparing himself to face ghosts he thought he had buried a decade ago. Orestes Prime was not a planet anymore. It was a scar in space. The obsidian dagger set down in a canyon of rusted metal, the remains of a megacity that had been leveled during the war. The sky was a perpetual bruise of purple and gray, choked by smog from the recycling factories that now processed the debris of civilization. They draped themselves in heavy scavenger cloaks and ventured out to secure supplies and information. The local settlement was a sprawling refugee camp, a shanty town of tents and lean-tos built against the ribs of fallen starships. This place, Nix whispered, looking around at the mud and the misery. It smells of old blood. It is a resettlement zone, Jace said, his voice flat. For species displaced by the conflict. Vampires, humans, Tellarites. Anyone who lost their home when the erratic borders shifted. They walked through the crowded, muddy streets. The people here were hollow-eyed, their bodies marked by laser burns and malnutrition. Beggars reached out with prosthetic hands that sparked and twitched. Nix walked with her head down, but Jace could feel her tension. She was seeing the architecture of her own legacy. Every crater, every orphan, every limb missing was a line item in the budget of her reign. They passed a group of veterans sitting around a burning barrel of chemical fuel. One of them, a human with half his face melted into scar tissue, was spitting on the ground as he told a story. Saw the black ships block out the sun. The man growled, "The Queen's banner." They didn't even hail us, just opened fire. My wife. She didn't even make it to the shelter. Nix stiffened. She stopped walking. Jace grabbed her arm. Keep moving, he hissed. Nix did not move. She was staring at a child, a young alien girl with blue skin and large, dark eyes, who was watching them from the doorway of a hovel. The child was holding a jagged piece of concrete. The girl's eyes locked onto Nix's face. The hood of Nix's cloak had slipped back just an inch, revealing the pale marble curve of her cheek and the distinctive violet tattoo of the royal house near her ear. The child's eyes went wide. She recognized the mark. Every child in the galaxy knew the mark of the monster. "Monster!" the girl shrieked. Before Jace could react, the child hurled the stone. It was a clumsy throw, weak and arcing. Nix could have caught it. She could have deflected it with a thought. She could have vaporized the stone in the hand that threw it before the rock traveled 2 feet. She did nothing. She stood perfectly still and let the stone strike her temple. The impact made a wet, cracking sound. The skin broke. The skin. A line of shimmering starlight blood trickled down her pale face. The market went silent. The veterans around the fire stood up, reaching for makeshift weapons. "Nix!" Jace stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. "Get back!" he shouted at the crowd. "She is wounded. She is the queen," the scarred veteran yelled. "That is the butcher. We have to go," Jace said, grabbing Nix's shoulder. She looked at him. Her eyes were not angry. They were filled with a hollow, crushing devastation. "I deserve it," she whispered. "Move!" Jace shoved her into an alleyway, dragging her into the shadows just as a bottle smashed where she had been standing. They ran through the maze of shanties, the shouts of the angry mob fading behind them. Jace found a secluded alcove beneath a collapsed bridge and pushed Nix down onto a crate. "Let me see," he ordered. He pulled a med scanner from his belt. His hands were shaking, but his movements were precise. He pushed back her hood. The cut was deep, the stone having jagged edges. "Why didn't you stop it?" Jace asked, and spraying antiseptic foam on the wound. "Because that child was right," Nix said. She stared straight ahead, her face mask-like. "I took her parents. I took her world. A stone is a small price for that debt. You cannot pay for a genocide 1 rock at a time." "Nix," Jace said gently. He applied a butterfly stitch to the cut. "I am just a human man treating wounds," he murmured, the old joke falling from his lips without humor. Nothing more. Nix looked at him. Her eyes softened. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing his palm against her cheek. "You are the only thing standing between me and the dark," she said. The moment shattered as a siren began to wail. Jace looked up. Through the gaps in the bridge overhead, he saw dropships descending. They were sleek, white vessels marked with the Red Cross of the Union Medical Corps. "Inspectors," Jace said. "Humanitarian aid." "No," Nix said, sniffing the air. "The ozone smell is too sharp. Those ships are carrying pulse cannons. They are not here for the refugees, they are here for us." The extraction was a nightmare. The Union inspectors were Shadow Council enforcers. They stormed the camp, kicking down doors, scanning faces, dragging people out into the mud. They were looking for a human medic and a vampire woman. Jace and Nix moved through the chaos like smoke. They could not just run. The inspectors were rounding up the refugees, corralling them into containment pens to process them. "They are going to kill them," Jace realized, watching from a rooftop. "They are purging the camp to remove witnesses." Nix stood beside him. Her hand was on the hilt of the blade at her hip. "We cannot save them all," she said. "We have to try," Jace said. "The med shuttle's at the landing pad. If we can hijack them, we can get the families out. It is a trap." "Jace, I know. Are you with me?" Nix looked at the determination in his eyes. She nodded. "Always." They split up. Jace moved to the landing pad, creating a distraction by hacking the camp's PA system and broadcasting a high-frequency feedback loop that scrambled the Enforcer's comms. Nyx moved through the shadows. She was a silent death. Enforcers vanished into alleyways, pulled by invisible hands, silenced before they could scream. Jace reached the shuttles and started hot-wiring the ignition sequence. "Get on board!" he shouted to a group of terrified refugees. "Go!" The first shuttle lifted off, then the second. But as the third shuttle spooled up, the trap snapped shut. A heavy assault walker stomped around the corner, its rotary cannons spinning up. Behind it, a platoon of soldiers took up firing positions. They had Jace pinned. "Surrender! Target!" the loudspeaker boomed. Jace ducked behind a fuel crate as bullets chewed up the concrete around him. He was pinned. He was dead. Then the sky turned black. It was not nightfall. It was Nyx. She dropped from the crane above the landing pad, landing in the center of the kill zone. But she was not the woman Jace had bandaged in the alley. She was the queen of the night. She threw her arms wide, and shadows erupted from her back like massive, tattered wings. The darkness was physical, tangible. It swirled around her, deflecting the hail of bullets. Nyx let out a scream that was not human. It was a resonant frequency that shattered the glass in the control tower. With a gesture of her hand, she unleashed a telekinetic shockwave. The assault walker, 20 tons of armored steel, was lifted into the air and crumpled like a soda can. She threw it into the platoon of soldiers. Jace watched, peeking over the crate. His mouth fell open. He felt a primal shiver of terror. This was the legend. This was the monster that mothers frightened their children with. She was magnificent. And she was absolutely terrifying. A halo of crimson light formed around her head, fed by the violence. She moved faster than sight, a blur of claws and shadow. She tore through the soldiers, not just killing them, but unmaking them. The remaining soldiers threw down their weapons. "We surrender," one screamed. Nyx did not stop. She lunged at the surrendering man, her hand raised to rip his heart out. Her eyes were burning white-hot. She was lost in the blood song. "Nyx!" Jace screamed. He scrambled over the crate and ran into the center of the slaughter. She did not hear him. Her claws were inches from the soldier's throat. Jace didn't think. He tackled her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and slammed her back against the landing strut of the shuttle. "Nyx, look at me," she snarled, thrashing against him. She was strong enough to break him in half. She raised a hand to strike him, her claws dripping with gore. Jace grabbed her wrist. He pressed his other hand, bloody from a graze on his arm, flat against the center of her chest, right over her unbeating heart. "It is Jace," he shouted. "It is Jace." The smell of his blood, so close, hit her like a drug. But instead of triggering hunger, the intimacy of the contact, his heartbeat hammering against her ribs, his voice calling her name, pierced the fog of rage. She froze. Her eyes flickered. The white heat faded, replaced by confusion, then horror. She looked at the soldier cowering on the ground. She looked at Jace, whose face was inches from hers, fearless and desperate. "Jace," she whispered. "I am here," he said, breathless. "Come back. You are safe. You do not have to kill them." Nyx slumped against him, the shadows retracting into her skin. She was trembling violently. "I almost—" She gasped. "I know," Jace said. "But you didn't." He steered her toward the ship ramp. "We are leaving." "Now!" The argument on the obsidian dagger was the loudest sound the ship had ever held. "You cannot do that," Jace yelled, pacing the medical bay while Nyx scrubbed the blood from her hands. "You cannot just turn off the morality switch because you are angry." They were killing my people, Nyx shouted back, spinning around, water and blood sprayed from her hands. They were slaughtering the innocent. Sometimes you have to be a monster to stop the monsters. Jace. That is the only language they speak. That is the language that burned the galaxy, Jace roared. If you save the universe by becoming the Terror again, then you haven't saved anything. You have just changed the management. Nyx stalked toward him, backing him against the counter. You want me to be gentle? You want me to be a saint? I am a vampire, Jace. I am a predator. This, inside me, it is who I am. You look at me and you see a woman. But I am death, and I am tired of pretending I am not. Jace did not back down. He stood his ground, chests heaving. I do not see a woman, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. And I do not see a monster. I see you. I see the person who took a rock to the face to pay a debt. I see the person who saved a family in a cargo hold. He reached out and grabbed her shoulders, his grip bruising. I see you, Nyx. All of you, the blood, the rage, the guilt. I see it all. And I am not flinching. Nyx stared at him. Her anger drained away, leaving her exposed and raw. Why? She whispered. Why do you not run? Because, Jace said, his voice breaking. Because I am an idiot who fell in love with a headache. The silence that followed was heavy and electric. Nyx let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She stepped into him, burying her face in his neck. You are a fool, she murmured against his skin. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him with a desperation that bordered on pain. Jace held her back, his hands tangling in her damp hair. They stayed like that for a long time, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Finally, they pulled apart. The air was thick with the things they hadn't done, the kiss they hadn't finished, the line they hadn't crossed. We can't, Nyx said softly, reading the question in his eyes. I know, Jace said. If we do this, if we cross that line now, it becomes a weakness. Nyx finished. The enemy will use it, and I am not stable enough. If I take you to bed, Jace, I might break you. Jace managed a weak smile. I am tougher than I look. I survived your cooking last night. Nyx laughed, a wet, shaky sound. She touched the bandage on his arm where he had been grazed. Your skin is so soft, she said wonderingly. It tears so easily. And yet you keep throwing yourself in front of bullets. It is a bad habit, Jace admitted. He went to the console and pulled a data chip from his pocket. While you were rewriting the laws of physics back there, I managed to record the inspectors. I got footage of them rounding up the refugees. I got audio of their orders from the council. He slotted the chip into the transmitter. I am uploading it to the underground networks. Every pirate station, every news outlet, every independent server. By morning, the whole galaxy will know the Union is purging refugee camps. It will weaken the council's narrative, Nyx said, nodding. They want to present themselves as saviors. This shows them as butchers. It buys us time, Jace said. But we still need to get into the summit. The ship's comms beeped, a priority channel request. Nyx frowned. That is a private frequency. Only 3 people in the universe have that code, and 2 of them are dead. She opened the channel. A holographic face appeared. It was a man, strikingly handsome, with silver hair and eyes like molten gold. He wore the high collar of a vampire duke. Nyx, the man said, his voice smooth as silk. You look terrible, my dear. Still wearing that dreadful bio-armor? Valerius? Nyx said, her voice turning cold. Is that the boyfriend? Jace asked, leaning into the frame. He looks like a chandelier. Valerius looked at Jace with amused distaste. And you must be the pet. The human medic. The bounty on your head is quite impressive. Little one. What do you want? Valerius? Nix snapped. I want to help you, Valerius said. I saw the upload. The refugee camp. It was crude. The Shadow Council lacks finesse. I have a shuttle clearing for the summit. I can get you inside the perimeter. Why would you help me? You tried to assassinate me twice in the Second Era. Old habits, Valerius dismissed with a wave of his hand. But this new regime. It is boring. Nix. Bureaucrats and generals. No style. I prefer the devil I know. He sent a set of coordinates. Meet me at the Azure Nebula. I will take you the rest of the way. Do not keep me waiting. The transmission ended. He is lying, Jace said immediately. Probably. Nix agreed. But he is also vain, arrogant, and hates being told what to do. If the council is ordering him around, he might genuinely want to rebel. And he called you my dear. Jace grumbled. Nix smirked. Are you jealous of the disco ball with fangs? No. Maybe. Yes. Nix patted his cheek. He was my consort for a decade. It meant nothing. He is incapable of love. He only loves mirrors. We need the ride. Jace sighed. Let us go meet the disco ball. The rendezvous at the Azure Nebula went smoothly. Too smoothly. Valerius's yacht was a masterpiece of luxury. Gold plating, velvet seats, and gravity that felt like floating on a cloud. He greeted Nix with a kiss on the hand that lasted 3 seconds too long, while Jace stood by, gripping his medkit like a weapon. You have aged well, Nix. Valerius purred, pouring drinks. The rugged look suits you, and the human. He has a certain rustic charm, like a stray dog one finds in an alley. I bite, Jace muttered. Valerius laughed. I am sure you do. They traveled toward the summit coordinates. The tension was palpable. Valerius spent the journey recounting old battles he and Nix had fought, pointedly excluding Jace from the conversation. He touched Nix's arm, laughed at inside jokes, and generally acted like a man staking a claim. Jace stewed in silence, watching the stars blur past. He felt small. He felt temporary. But Nix kept glancing at Jace. She kept shifting away from Valerius, moving closer to where Jace sat. We are approaching the perimeter, Valerius announced. I need you both in the cargo hold. The scanners will pick up your biosigns on the bridge. Fine, Nix said. She grabbed Jace's hand and pulled him toward the hold. Watch your back, Jace whispered as the door closed. The cargo hold was lavish, filled with art and crates of rare wine. But as the door hissed shut, there was a heavy metallic thunk of magnetic locks engaging. Jace frowned. That didn't sound like a privacy lock. He tried the panel. Dead. We are locked in, he said. Nix spun around. Valerius, open this door. The ship's intercom crackled. I am sorry, my dear. Valerius's voice came through, sounding genuinely regretful. But the council made me an offer I could not refuse. A seat at the high table, and governorship of the Pleiades sector. You traitorous snake, Nix screamed, pounding on the door. You were always going to lose. Nix. Valerius sighed. The era of queens is over, but do not worry. I negotiated for your life. You will be imprisoned, not executed. We will have eternity to catch up. The ship shuddered as it docked with a larger vessel, a council cruiser. They are boarding, Jace said. He looked around frantically. Vent! There is a maintenance vent up there. He pointed to a grate near the ceiling. Nix ripped the grate off. Go, she ordered. You go, Jace said. You can fit. I will hold the door. Jace, if they catch you, it is over. Jace yelled. If they catch me, I am just a hostage. Go. The main door began to burn orange. They were cutting through. Nix looked at Jace. She looked at the vent. She knew he was right. If she was captured, the resistance died. I will come for you, she vowed. I swear it. Go! Nix leaped into the vent, vanishing into the ship's guts just as the cargo door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Soldiers in heavy armor poured in, weapons raised. Jace stood in the center of the room, hands raised. Valerius strolled in behind the soldiers, holding a handkerchief to his nose. Where is she? Valerius asked, looking around the empty room. Jace smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile he had learned from Nix. She is gone, Jace said. And you are going to regret not checking the vents. Valerius's face twisted in fury. Take him, he ordered. The council will want the pet. The soldiers grabbed Jace, dragging him away. Jace did not struggle. He just kept smiling, knowing that somewhere in the walls of the ship, a monster was loose, and she was pissed. Nix was not in the walls. She had made it back to the obsidian dagger, which had been tethered to Valerius's yacht. She sat in the pilot's seat, watching the council cruiser detach and jump away, taking Jace with it. The silence on the ship was absolute. She looked at the empty co-pilot seat. She looked at the half-drunk coffee mug Jace had left on the console. She felt a tearing sensation in her chest, a pain sharper than any blade. They had him. They had her anchor. They had the only person who had ever looked at her and seen a soul. Nix stood up. She walked to the armory. She began to strap on her armor, the heavy black plate of the War Queen. She slotted jagged blades into her gauntlets. She calibrated the weapon systems on the ship. Her eyes were not violet anymore. They were not red. They were voids of absolute darkness. She was terrified. She was heartbroken. But beneath it all, she was enraged in a way she had not been in 1,000 years. They had taken her human. Computer, she said, her voice a low, vibrating growl. Set a course for the summit. Override all safety protocols. Charge the main cannons. Destination confirmed, the ship whispered. Objective? Nix looked at the stars. Burn it all down, she said. The world was white, sterile, and smelled of burning ozone. Jace Callahan woke to the rhythmic beep of a cardiac monitor. He tried to move his arms, but they were heavy, strapped down to a metal table that felt uncomfortably similar to the one in his own clinic. Wires ran from his chest, his temples, and most disturbingly from the crook of his arm where Nix had bitten him. Interesting, a disembodied voice said from somewhere above him. The subject is showing elevated dopamine levels despite the stress factors. The bond is chemically resilient. Jace blinked, his vision clearing. He was in a circular lab, surrounded by glass walls. Beyond the glass, figures in white coats moved with the detached efficiency of butchers. He turned his head. A young technician, looking no older than 20, was adjusting a drip feed next to him. The kid's hands were shaking. Hey, Jace croaked. His throat felt like he had swallowed sandpaper. If you are going to drain me, could you at least warm the needle first? It is common courtesy. The technician jumped, nearly dropping his data pad. You are awake. I am, Jace said. And I am guessing this is not the VIP lounge of the Summit Hotel. The lead scientist stepped into view. He was a Union xenobiologist Jace recognized from academic journals, Dr. Eris Thorne, a man who had written papers on the ethics of interspecies medicine, now apparently ignoring all of them. Mr. Callahan, Thorne said, peering at a holographic display of Jace's blood work. You are a fascinating specimen. The Queen's saliva has not just healed you, it has rewritten parts of your genetic code. You are a living battery for vampiric energy. Jace tested the restraints. They were durasteel. So I am a juice box, Jace said dryly. Is that it? You capture the queen and you keep me around for snacks? Oh no, Thorn said, smiling without warmth. We do not need you for feeding. We need the template. If we can synthesize the compound in your blood that allows for this distinct, subservient bonding, we can mass-produce a serum. We can make every vampire in the galaxy as docile as a house cat. We will not just win the war. Mr. Callahan, we will own the enemy. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. They wanted to enslave an entire species. That is a lot of work, Jace said, keeping his voice light. Usually, you just buy a guy a drink to get him to listen to you. Thorn ignored him. Prepare the extraction centrifuge. We need 2 liters of marrow. 2 liters? Jace did the math. That would kill him. Thorn turned to walk away. The technician, the young one, lingered. He looked at Jace, then at the floor. Kid, Jace whispered. The technician looked up. His name tag read Ren. Ren, Jace said softly. You know this is wrong. You took an oath. Or at least, you signed a contract that probably had a clause about not grinding people into paste. I just follow orders, Ren whispered. That is what they said at the Nuremberg trials. Jace said, look at my chart. Ren, look at the jagged spikes in the neural activity. That is not subservience. That is fear. I am terrified. Ren looked at the monitor. He saw the erratic, frantic rhythm of a human heart pushed to its limit. I can't help you, Ren hissed. The door is biolocked. I do not need you to open the door, Jace said. I need you to be clumsy. That sedative drip? If you accidentally dialed it up to lethal levels, the system would trigger a crash cart response, wouldn't it? It would unlock the restraints for resuscitation. Ren's eyes went wide. That would stop your heart. I am a medic. Jace grinned, though sweat beaded on his forehead. I know exactly how long I can stay dead before it sticks. Do it. Be a hero, Ren, or be a butcher. Pick one. High above the detention block, in the grand spire of the summit station. Nyx Arathiel walked in chains. They were ceremonial chains made of gold and light, draped over her wrists and ankles. She wore a gown of heavy black velvet that swallowed the light, a stark contrast to the gleaming white uniforms of the Union admirals and the silver finery of the vampire high lords. She walked with her head bowed, playing the part of the broken queen. The summit hall was a cathedral of hypocrisy. The ceiling was a transparent dome showing the swirling nebula outside, while the floor was polished obsidian. Thousands of delegates sat in tiered rows, corporate magnates, planetary governors, military leaders. They watched her with a mix of hunger and triumph. The monster was leashed. The nightmare was over. Nyx kept her face impassive, but beneath her skin, her blood was boiling. She could feel the obsidian dagger hovering in stealth mode just outside the station's shields, waiting for her signal. But she could not signal yet. Not until she knew where Jace was. She was led to a raised platform in the center of the room. The Shadow Council sat there, 5 individuals who held the leash of the galaxy. General Kale of the Union and Lord Malachor of the vampire aristocracy sat side by side. Behold, Lord Malachor boomed, his voice amplified to reach the furthest rows. The architect of our suffering, the queen of ruin, the crowd roared. Nyx did not flinch. Kale stood up. Today, we do not just celebrate peace, we ensure it. We have developed a defense network, a biological shield that will protect our worlds from the chaos of the past. He gestured to a massive holographic screen floating above the dais. But first, let us see the truth of the Queen's resistance. The screen flickered to life. Nyx looked up. and her heart stopped. It was footage from the outpost. It was Jace, treating her wounds. But the audio had been warped. Jace's concern had been edited to sound like groveling worship. The lighting had been altered to make Nyx look demonic, her eyes glowing with unnatural malice. "He is mine," the edited audio of Nyx's voice hissed, "a thrall to serve me." The scene shifted to Jace in the detention lab, looking pale and broken, wired to the machines. This human, Kale narrated, fell under her spell. He betrayed his own kind. He is a victim of her mind control. And today, we grant him the only mercy left. The image on the screen changed to a live feed. Jace was being unstrapped from the table by guards, looking barely conscious. "He will be executed alongside the Queen," Kale announced, "a symbol that we must purge the infection completely." Nyx felt a physical blow to her chest. They were going to kill him, not in secret, but here, in front of her, to break her. She looked at the council. She saw the smug satisfaction in Malakor's eyes. They thought she was tamed. They thought the chains binding her were real. Nyx closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, not to the ship, but to the station itself. She felt the hum of the gravity generators. She felt the electrical grid. And she felt the whisper networks, the thousands of bloodless servants, the janitors, the technicians who were listening on secret frequencies. Now, she sent the thought, "Burn it." In the lab. Ren's hand hovered over the dial. He looked at Jace, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Ren closed his eyes and spun the dial to maximum. The alarm shrieked instantly. Cardiac arrest. The computer screamed. Initiating emergency protocol. The durasteel clamps on Jace's wrists snapped open. Jace did not wait for his heart to stop. He rolled off the table, grabbing a scalpel from the tray. Thorn spun around. "What are you doing?" Jace slammed the scalpel into the power junction of the main server bank. Sparks showered the room. "Making a withdrawal!" Jace yelled. The lights in the lab died. The containment doors, detecting a power failure, cycled open. Jace sprinted. He was dizzy, his blood full of sedatives, but adrenaline was a powerful antidote. He grabbed Ren by the collar and shoved him toward the emergency exit. "Run, kid, go home." Jace ran the other way, toward the lift that led to the spire. He jammed his datapad into the lift's control panel. "Come on," he muttered, his fingers flying. "I wrote the code for this update. Let me in." The lift doors opened. Jace stumbled inside. As the lift shot upward, Jace pulled up the station's schematics. He tapped into the ventilation control. "If you want a plague," Jace muttered grimly, "I will give you a plague of darkness." He overloaded the lighting grid for the entire spire. In the summit hall, the lights did not just go out, they exploded. Shower of sparks rained down on the delegates. Panic rippled through the crowd. The live feed of the execution cut out. General Kale drew his sidearm. "Emergency power, secure the prisoner." But the prisoner was not there. Where Nyx had been standing, there was only a pile of melted gold chains. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. The gravity plating groaned and then reversed. Delegates screamed as they floated out of their seats. Wine glasses shattered, the liquid hanging in the air like blood droplets. From the shadows of the vaulted ceiling, a figure descended. Nyx did not fall. She drifted, wrapped in a cloak of living darkness. Her eyes were twin suns of violet fire. She did not look like a politician. She looked like a deity of vengeance. She landed on the dais. The impact sent a shockwave that knocked the Shadow Council to their knees. "Malakor!" she shouted, her voice amplified by her own power. "You wanted a show?" She lashed out with a whip of shadow, wrapping it around Malakor's throat and hoisting him into the air. "Jace!" The lift doors at the back of the stage blasted open. Jace stumbled out. He was pale, bleeding from his IV site, but he was alive. "Nix!" Jace yelled. Guards rushed him. 4 Union elites with plasma rifles. Jace dived behind a podium as bolts chewed up the floor. He was pinned. Nix saw him. She saw the guards lining up the kill shot. She dropped Malachor. She did not attack the guards. She did not summon a shield. She ran. She threw herself across the stage, moving faster than the eye could track. Just as the guards fired, Nix slid in front of Jace. She spread her arms. 3 plasma bolts struck her in the back. The sound was sickening, the hiss of burning flesh, the crunch of impact. Nix gasped, her body arching with the force of the blows. She collapsed forward into Jace's arms. "Nix!" Jace screamed. The entire hall went silent. The monster had just taken a bullet for the pet. Jace dragged her behind the heavy council table. His hands were instantly covered in her shimmering blood. "You idiot!" Jace cried, pressing his hands to the smoking wounds on her back. "You absolute idiot, why did you do that?" Nix coughed, blood flecking her lips. She looked up at him, her eyes hazy. Conservation of energy. She wheezed, forcing a smile. "You are harder to repair." Jace felt tears stinging his eyes. He grabbed a stim pack from his belt and jammed it into her neck. "Do not you dare die on me. We have a deal. You get the throne, I get the coffee." Nix groaned, her healing factor struggling against the trauma. I know, Jace said. He did not hesitate. He ripped the sleeve of his tunic. He brought his wrist to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded. Nix looked at him. She looked at the cameras, which had switched to backup power and were broadcasting this moment to the entire galaxy. "If I do this," she whispered, "they will see." "Let them see," Jace said fierce. "Let them see what loyalty looks like." He pressed his wrist against her fangs. Nix bit down. It was not the savage tearing of a beast. It was a desperate, sacred act. Jace flinched, then leaned his head against hers, his hand cupping the back of her head, anchoring her. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They saw the human man sustaining the vampire woman. They saw the tenderness in his hands. They saw the way she clung to him, not as a master, but as a drowning woman clinging to a raft. Strength flooded back into Nix. The wounds on her back knit together with visible speed. Her skin began to glow with terrifying radiance. She released him, licking the wound to seal it. She stood up. She helped Jace to his feet. She turned to the council. This time, she did not look like a victim. She looked like an apocalypse. She raised her hand. Shadows erupted from the floor, taking the shape of massive serpentine tendrils. They slammed the guards against the walls. They wrapped around General Kale and Lord Malachor, dragging them to the center of the stage. Nix pinned them there, suspended in the air. "Confess," she commanded. "I will tell you nothing," Kale shouted. Nix flicked her finger. The shadow tightened. Kale gasped. "I am not asking," Nix said. She drove a spike of psychic will into their minds. It was a brutal, invasive technique she had banned centuries ago, but she used it now with surgical precision. "Speak." Kale's eyes rolled back. His mouth opened, and words poured out, unbidden. "Project Absolution. It is a cull. We release the virus on the colonies to create panic. We blame the Queen to seize power. The nanites target the poor, the dissidents, the non-humans. We wanted a clean galaxy." The confession echoed through the silent hall. It was broadcast to every screen in the system. Nix released them. They fell to the floor, gasping. She looked out at the crowd, at the admirals, the governors. "You built your peace on a lie," she said, her voice cold and clear. "You called me a monster so you could become devils." A slow clapping started. It was not applause. It was the sound of magnetic boots locking into place. The doors to the chamber opened. A regiment of Union soldiers marched in. But they were not pointing their weapons at Nix. They were pointing them at the council. We heard the broadcast. The captain said, "We stand down." Nix looked at Jace. He was leaning against the table, pale but grinning. "Told you," he said. "Everyone loves an underdog." But the victory was short-lived. A siren began to wail, a low, discordant sound that vibrated in their teeth. Fail-safe initiated. The computer announced, "Plague dispersal network activated. T-5 minutes." Malachor laughed from the floor. He wiped blood from his mouth. "Did you think we were fools? If we fall, the galaxy falls with us. The satellites are locked. The nanites will launch. You cannot stop it." Nix looked at the holographic map. Red dots were lighting up across the sector. Jace checked his datapad. He locked the system. "It is hardwired. We cannot hack it from here." "Where is the control node?" Nix asked. "The core," Jace said. "The engineering deck. But that is 20 levels down, and the security systems are in riot mode." Nix looked at the chaos erupting in the hall. The delegates were fleeing. The soldiers were arguing. "We have to go," she said. She grabbed Jace's hand. They ran. The corridor outside the hall was a war zone. Gravity surges were flipping floors into ceilings. Holographic advertisements were glitching, turning models into strobe light demons. They fought back to back. Nix was a blur of shadow, deflecting debris and blasting locked doors open. Jace was the eyes, calling out threats, using his medical scanner to find structural weaknesses in the walls. "Left!" Jace yelled. "Gravity well!" Nix grabbed him and leaped, soaring over a distortion field that would have crushed them flat. They landed in a service tunnel. Jace leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He checked his ammo count on the stun pistol he had scavenged. 3 shots left, he said. "And I think I pulled a stitch." Nix looked at him. She was pristine, terrifyingly beautiful in her rage. But her eyes were filled with fear for him. "Jace," she said, "you should take an escape pod. Here we go again." Jace groaned. "I am serious. The core. The radiation levels near the dispersal unit will be lethal to a human." "Then I guess I will hold my breath," Jace said. He reloaded his pistol. "Listen to me. Nix. You cannot interface with the Union tech without a biological bridge. You need me to type the codes, and I need you to keep the murder bots off my back. We are a set. You do not break up the set." Nix stared at him. She reached out and touched his face, her thumb tracing his lower lip. "You are the most stubborn creature I have ever met. It is part of my charm." They heard the heavy thud of boots approaching. "Ready?" Jace asked. Nix turned to the door. Her shadows unfurled like wings. "Always." She blasted the door open. They stepped out into the crossfire, moving toward the heart of the machine that threatened to consume their world, hand in hand, into the dark. The descent toward the engineering deck was a journey through the throat of a dying beast. The summit station was tearing itself apart. The structural integrity field had collapsed in Sector 4, causing the floor to ripple like water. Fires burned in zero gravity, spheres of blue and orange flame floating through the corridors, consuming oxygen and durasteel alike. Jace and Nix moved through the inferno, not as a queen and her subject, nor as a medic and a monster, but as a single, synchronized entity. Nix took the lead, her shadows forming a wedge that plowed through debris. When a bulkhead collapsed, she caught it with a telekinetic scream, her muscles straining, veins of starlight blood pulsing in her neck. Jace was right behind her, moving with the economy of a soldier. He scanned the smoke for heat signatures, guiding them through the safest paths, his stun pistol barking to clear automated defense turrets. But they did not just run. In a corridor choked with toxic smoke, they found a squad of Union medics pinned down by a malfunctioning security droid. The droid was strafing their position, and the medics were out of ammo. Nix's instinct was to bypass them. Speed was the only metric that mattered. The plague was minutes away from deployment. "Left!" Nix shouted, pointing to a service vent. "No!" Jace yelled, grabbing her arm. He pointed to the medics. "They are trapped! They are Union!" Nix roared over the sound of the klaxons. "They are the enemy. They are people," Jace shot back. He did not wait for her permission. He broke cover, sliding across the polished floor behind a fallen statue. He fired his pistol, drawing the droid's fire. Nix cursed in high Gothic, a sound that cracked the nearby glass. But she moved. She lunged forward, not toward the vent, but toward the droid. She tore its head off with a single savage motion of her claws, sparking wires hissing as the machine died. The Union medics stared at her, terrified. They saw the vampire from the propaganda posters, the nightmare in black armor. "Get to the escape pods," Jace ordered them, pulling a wounded nurse to her feet. "Level 9 is clear, go!" The medics hesitated, looking from the human to the monster. Then the lead medic nodded, a sharp, shocked gesture of gratitude, and they ran. It happened again and again. They pulled a trapped vampire servant from under a collapsed beam. Jace used his last med patch to seal the sucking chest wound of a Union Marine who had been left behind by his commanding officer. With every life they saved, the bond between them hardened. Nix began to see the station not as a target, but as a vessel of souls. She saw the fear in their eyes, not fear of her, but fear of death, and she recognized it. They reached the heavy blast doors of the core antechamber. Leaning against the control panel, clutching a bleeding side, was Admiral Holloway. He was one of the Shadow Council members who had sat on the dais, one of the men who had sentenced them to death. Nix stopped. Her shadows flared, sharpening into spikes. "He is the one who authorized the blockade," she hissed. Holloway looked up. His face was gray. He held a datapad in his trembling hand. "The code is alphanumeric," Holloway wheezed. Nix paused. "Why?" "I saw—" Holloway coughed, blood spattering his white uniform. "I watched the feed. You saved the thralls. You saved the medics. The council. They left me here to rot. They evacuated the moment the alarms tripped." He slid the datapad across the floor. "Override sequence Alpha 9. It gets you into the core. Stop it, please. My daughter is on a colony world in the dispersal zone." Nix looked at the man who had tried to kill her. She saw a father. Jace knelt down and checked Holloway's pulse. "He is going into shock." Jace injected a stimulant into the Admiral's neck. "Stay awake, Admiral," Jace said gently. "Help is coming." Holloway looked at Jace with wet, confused eyes. "Why?" "Because we are not them," Jace said. He grabbed the datapad. He punched in the code. The blast doors groaned and cycled open. The core chamber was a cavern of sensory violence. In the center of the spherical room, a massive column of energy throbbed, the heartbeat of the station and the dispersal engine for the nanites. The air tasted of copper. The noise was a deafening, rhythmic thrum that vibrated the bones. Suspended around the energy column were thousands of canisters, the plague, enough death to silence the galaxy. Jace ran to the main console. He plugged in Holloway's override code. "I am in," he shouted. "I can access the deployment protocols. Shut it down," Nix commanded, watching the door for reinforcements. "I am trying." Jace's fingers flew across the holographic interface. "But, oh God, what?" "It is a dead man's switch," Jace said, his voice dropping. The Council rigged it. If I execute the abort command, the energy buildup has nowhere to go. It backlashes. What does that mean, Jace? It means if we stop the plague, the core goes critical. The station detonates. Instant vaporization. Everyone on board dies. Us. The refugees. The soldiers. Everyone. And if we do nothing? Nyx asked. Then the plague launches in 3 minutes, Jace said. And billions die. Silence fell between them, heavy and terrible. Nyx looked at the swirling energy of the core. She looked at her hands, stained with the blood of centuries. Then there is no choice, she said softly. She walked toward the console. Jace, get to the escape pods. What? Jace spun around. You can make it, Nyx said. You know the maintenance shafts. If you run now, you can get clear of the blast radius. And you? I will stay, Nyx said. I will manually hold the triggers until the last second. I will make sure the abort sequence completes. No, Jace said immediately. No way. It is the only way, Nyx shouted, her composure cracking. Look at me. Jace, look at what I am. I am a relic of a bloody age. My ledger is dripping with red. If I die today to save 1 billion lives, then that is justice. That is the only redemption I will ever get. She grabbed his shoulders, trying to shove him toward the door. Go, live. Jace, find a quiet rock, drink coffee, forget me. Jace grabbed her wrists. He did not pull away. He stepped in. I will not, he said. You stubborn fool. I am not letting you become a martyr just because you hate yourself, Jace yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. You think dying is the answer? Dying is easy. Nyx, living is the hard part. Living with what you did and waking up every day to make it right, that is brave. He pulled her closer until their foreheads touched. The galaxy does not need another dead monster. Nyx, it needs you. It needs the woman who took a rock to the face and didn't strike back. It needs the queen who saves her enemies. Nyx was trembling. Tears spilled from her eyes, hot and fast. I am afraid, she whispered, her voice so small in the roaring room. Jace, I am so afraid. I know, Jace whispered back. Me too. He looked at her lips. He looked at the chaos around them. He let go of her wrists and cupped her face. I love you, he said. Nyx let out a ragged breath. I love you. They kissed. It was not the kiss of a fairy tale. It was the kiss of two people standing on the edge of oblivion. It was fierce, salty with tears and sweat, desperate and consuming. Nyx's fingers tangled in Jace's hair, pulling him closer, trying to merge their very atoms. Jace held her waist, anchoring her to the ground, anchoring her to life. For a moment, the screaming alarms faded. The heat of the core receded. There was only the pressure of his mouth on hers, the beat of his heart against her chest. They broke apart, gasping, foreheads resting together. There has to be another way. Jace breathed. Think, Jace, think. You are a medic. This is a disease. How do you treat a disease? He looked at the console. He looked at the nanite schematics. Wait, he said. He pulled up the structural analysis of the nanites. They are programmable matter, he said, his eyes widening. They are designed to seek out genetic markers and destroy them. But the hardware is just a delivery system. He looked at Nyx. Your blood. It is mutagenic. It rewrites DNA. That is how you healed me. That is how the bond works. Nyx wiped her mouth. What are you saying? If we introduce your blood into the source code, Jace said, speaking faster now. If we use your biological signature as the new directive, we can reprogram the swarm. We do not have to shut them down. We can change them. Change them to what? To healers, Jace said. Instead of targeting life, we tell them to target weapons. We tell them to eat gunpowder, to dissolve nerve gas, to dismantle the very machinery of war. Nix looked at the bubbling tanks. Can we do that? You have to interface with the core, Jace said. Directly. You have to let the system read your essence. But Nix, the strain, it will try to digitize your consciousness. You could get lost in the network. You could forget who you are. Nix looked at the deadly swirling light. Then she looked at Jace. I will not forget, she said. Not if you are with me. She stepped up to the interface node. She slashed her palm with a claw. She pressed her bleeding hand onto the input panel. Jace grabbed her other hand. He laced their fingers together. I have you, he said. I am the anchor. Nix closed her eyes. The world dissolved. Jace was no longer standing in the core. He was floating in a river of liquid starlight. He was inside Nix's mind. It was vast. It was terrifying. He saw centuries of memory flashing by like comets. He saw the burning of the Proxima colony, felt the heat of the flames, tasted the ash. He felt the cold, crushing loneliness of sitting on the obsidian throne for 200 years, surrounded by sycophants who feared him. He felt her hunger, a constant gnawing void that screamed for blood. He felt her guilt. It was a physical weight, a mountain of stones she carried on her back, each stone a life she had taken. The data stream threatened to wash him away. The nanite network was trying to assimilate her, to turn her memories into binary code. Nix! Jace screamed into the void. He fought back. He did not have centuries of power. He had something else. He had humanity. He pushed his own memories into the stream. He showed her the smell of rain on a tin roof. He showed her the taste of bad coffee on a Tuesday morning. He showed her the feeling of patching up a child's scraped knee and seeing them smile. He showed her the moment he first saw her in the hangar. Not a monster, but a broken angel in the smoke. Stay with me, his thought voice echoed. Come back to the coffee. Come back to the quiet. In the digital storm, the two currents met. The cold, regal violet of Nix's history mixed with the warm, messy gold of Jace's life. They fused. The directive in the machine changed. Target. Life was overwritten. Target, harm. Target, weaponry. Target, pain. The core turned from angry red to a blinding, brilliant white. In the physical world, Nix screamed. It was a sound of agony and ecstasy as her blood turned to light. Jace held on. His skin was blistering from the energy output, but he squeezed her hand tighter. I am here, he shouted. I am right here. The explosion was silent. A wave of white particles erupted from the summit station. It washed over the gathered fleets and it washed over the planet below. It did not kill. On the Union dreadnoughts, the targeting computers dissolved into dust. In the soldiers' hands, rifles turned to sand. On the surface of the planet, the stockpiles of nerve gas neutralized into water. The nanites swept across the system, a tidal wave of enforced peace. They ate the war. In the core chamber, the feedback loop shattered the console. Jace and Nix were thrown backward. They hit the wall and slid to the floor, unconscious, their hands still locked together. The ceiling above them groaned. A massive slab of durasteel sheared off, plummeting toward them. It never hit. A beam of tractor energy caught the debris, freezing it in midair. Through the smoke, figures emerged. They were not angels. They were dirty, bloody, and exhausted. It was the squad of Union medics Jace had saved. It was the vampire servants Nix had freed. It was Admiral Halloway, leaning on a crutch. Get them out, Halloway barked. The medics rushed forward. They lifted Jace and Nix onto hover stretchers. As they ran toward the waiting shuttles, the summit station began to break apart behind them, a crumbling monument to an era that had just ended. 3 months later. The kitchen was small. brightly lit, and smelled of toast. Jace stood in front of the open refrigerator, wearing nothing but boxer shorts and a t-shirt that said Outpost 4 Beta Bowling League. "Nix," he called out. "From the living room," a voice answered. It was regal, melodic, and sounded slightly annoyed. "What is it, Jace?" "Why is your blood supply next to the milk?" Jace asked, holding up a crimson bag. "We talked about this. Top shelf is for hemoglobins. Middle shelf is for dairy and leftovers. This is cross-contamination." Nix floated into the kitchen. She was wearing a silk robe and hovering 3 inches off the floor because she couldn't be bothered to walk. "It keeps it colder," she said, drifting over to the coffee maker. "And speaking of fluids, this bean water you brew is an insult to chemistry. It is weak. It is a medium roast," Jace defended, putting the blood bag on the correct shelf. "It has nuance. Not everything has to taste like iron and adrenaline." Nix poured a cup, grimaced, and drank it anyway. She looked at the clock on the wall. "We are going to be late," she said. "The Interspecies Council meets in an hour." Jace groaned, leaning his head against the fridge door. Not another meeting. "I hate politics. It is just people arguing about trade tariffs in rooms with bad air conditioning. You are the one who insisted on reparations and ethical constraints," Nix reminded him, floating closer. "You are the liaison of reform. You have to go. And you are the High Chancellor of the transition," Jace countered. "You also have to go." Nix sighed. She landed on the floor and wrapped her arms around Jace's waist from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "Can we not just skip it?" she whispered. "We could take the ship, go to the rim, hide in an asteroid belt for a week." Jace turned around in her arms. He smiled, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "And leave the galaxy unsupervised? They would blow themselves up by lunchtime." He kissed her forehead. "Go put on your scary suit. I will find my tie." The new council chamber was built on the surface of Orestes Prime, in the middle of a field that had once been a crater and was now blooming with blue wildflowers. The meeting was chaotic. The Union admirals were shouting about budget cuts. The vampire lords were hissing about territory rights. Nix sat at the head of the table. She wore a suit of white and gray, no longer the black of the executioner. She listened. She mediated. She did not threaten to flay anyone. Jace sat to her right. He spent half the time translating military jargon into medical metaphors so the diplomats could understand, and the other half kicking Nix under the table whenever she looked like she wanted to vaporize a lobbyist. It was boring. It was frustrating. It was hard work. And it was peace. That evening, back in their quarters, the lights were dimmed. The gravity was set to low, simulating the drift of space. Nix put on a record, an ancient vinyl Jace had scavenged. Soft jazz filled the room. They danced. They did not speak. They just moved together. Nix's head resting on Jace's chest, listening to the steady rhythmic thump of his heart. She tightened her arms around him. "You are warm," she murmured. "You are cold," Jace whispered back. "It is a good balance," she said. She pulled back to look at him. Her eyes were violet, deep and endless. "Do you remember the core?" she asked softly. "When we merged?" "Yeah," Jace said. "Hard to forget." "I saw myself through your eyes," Nix said. "I saw forgiveness. I didn't think I deserved it." Jace stopped dancing. He held her face. "You earned it, Nix. Every day you wake up and choose not to be the Queen of Ruin, you earn it." Nix leaned into his touch. She closed her eyes. "I am still hungry. Sometimes," she confessed. "The darkness, it is still there." "I know," Jace said. "And I am still afraid of loud noises. We are works in progress. Nix. He leaned down and kissed her. It was slow, deliberate, and full of a quiet, steady heat. The final scene took place on the observation deck of the rebuilt station. The viewport was a massive pane of glass, looking out into the infinite scatter of the cosmos. The stars were bright, unblemished by the shadows of warships. Nix stood by the railing, a glass of synthetic red wine in her hand. Jace stood beside her holding a mug of coffee. They watched the traffic, freighters carrying grain, medical ships carrying vaccines, passenger liners carrying families. It is strange, Nix said, to look at the dark and not see targets. It is called scenery, Jace said. You get used to it. Nix chuckled. She gestured with her glass toward a particularly bright cluster of stars. You know, she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. The legends say I could drink those dry, swallow the light of a whole system. I heard that rumor. Jace nodded. I could still do it, Nix mused. Just one sip. Jace took a sip of his coffee. He looked at her, at the woman who could crush a tank with her mind but who now spent her days arguing about zoning laws and her nights learning how to cook pasta. He set his mug down on the railing. He reached out and took her free hand. If you ever get thirsty, he said softly. If you ever forget who you are or who you want to be, I am right here. Nix looked at him. The playfulness faded from her face, replaced by a look of profound, terrifying vulnerability. You would treat the wounds? She whispered, echoing the first word she had ever heard him speak to himself. Jace smiled. It was the smile of a man who had seen the worst the universe had to offer, and had chosen to love it anyway. I am just a human man, he said. Treating wounds is what I do. Nix smiled back. It was real. It was unguarded. It was the smile of a woman who had finally put down her sword. She squeezed his hand. Then I suppose I will just have to settle for the coffee, she said. They turned back to the window, standing shoulder to shoulder watching the lights of the galaxy drift by. Two small sparks in the endless dark, burning bright and steady, together.